real quick. I'm glad that you number one, this is being recorded and that you're willing to share so much. And I just personally appreciate that because some people are kind of stingy, you know what I'm saying, with what they what they create. So just kind of rolling from the beginning, right? Like starting with genius that's shimmering in front of us, all students, right? And that black people always started with genius. And so we should model that here. The addition of joy, reading and learning that's culturally relevant can take students all over the world and experience joy. I love the phrase animate the human soul. I have way more notes in this, but I'm just gonna read a couple of things, but we see too often in schools these narratives that defy joy, right? Calling students non-readers and all those things that we do that harm kids. The erasure of black genius, right? I made sure to note that in education in favor of European theorists instead of the black liberators that we know so well and owe so much to, right? And that the whiteness in current curricula, reflects that of the 1600s. I love that you went to the text, that primer text from the 1600s, right, to show the parallels to what we're doing now in Georgia and Wisconsin and the United States as a whole. And we fail, to tell the truth, right? I want to do mention that she also referred us to Stephanie Jones, Mapping Racial Trauma. I follow that on Facebook. So much great stuff there. I mean, it's sad to see, right, the things that people do, but the responses are so beautiful that you see from her and others. And so I definitely wanted to mention that. And then I just want, this idea of imagine what students of color can do if the educational system raised them up instead of crushing them. And so many examples were given during this talk. And I just appreciate that. And I would ask people to kind of go back and hear the many examples that Dr. Muhammad gave us, right? And a couple that I just wanted to, say, obviously the thing of layering text, right? With the 5 pursuits: identity, skills, intellect, criticality, and joy. And this should be done in classrooms, but can also be done at home, right? To counteract the lily whiteness of many educational things that we see. And last but not least, for late students, from the students in South Africa. Now that you're here, we are more complete. That just represents like this mind shift for me. Like, man, if we just would talk to and humanize our students and how we speak to them. And then I swear I didn't plan to wear this shirt, right? The Harriet Tubman quote, when you hear the dogs keep running,
It's a
you know what I mean?
connection.
There's something going on, right? And I just, I love that you ended with that quote, because any of us on the call that try to do equity work, man, the dogs, they never stop. So that's my little brief notes. I'm sure some people took better notes than I did, but thank goodness that this is recorded. So I'll continue because we do have some questions, right? And so I'll take some of the questions that were prepared, some of which you covered already. So I'm going to skip through, and then I didn't see many in the Q&A, so I'm hoping that people will be feeding me more as we go. But we do have some questions for you. Like, I just wanted to start with, as an English teacher, I'm a nerd out for a second. Why was it so important for you to make the connection between those literacy societies for the 19th century and the literacy learning as it appears today? Like, why was that, the starting place, and why does that still, resonate for you?
You know, I have just in my work as a reading specialist and coach and a classroom teacher, of course, a school district administrator, a school board president, and just a teacher educator. Now I got tired. I get tired and I want change now. And we needed a new way. And I wanted to figure it out. And I'm a pedagogue. Like I don't sit in theory. I'm not one of them who just talk about, so we need social justice. I'm like, uh, anything I say, I put into a lesson plan. I want to see what it looks like in practice. And so when I was in grad school, I was interested in these literacy clubs. And, like Alfred Tatum pointed me to this history, and I took a whole class on it, and I studied this history, and I would just like stay in the archives and dig. I would go to every library and look at their old archives and the microfiche and the newspapers. And I, in my mind, started like organizing the artifacts and archives. Well, they're talking about identity. They're talking about skills. They're talking about criticality. And it just, it's the same way how you ended up wearing that sweatshirt. Our ancestors are guiding us. They are, and they guided me, I believe, to this roadmap. They said, we left it for you. And I'm not the first to say these things, and I won't be the last. Folks write about this stuff. I just put it in a different model and format that may be applicable for mathematics, science, and all these content areas. So it's the ancestors that inspire me, that teach me, and I would read one thing and it would lead me to another.
Thank you so much. So we do have a question from our audience. It says, "Why is unpacking of self identity important for teachers that are cis het Black Latino males?"
I mean, just much like any of us, before you teach identity, you have to do your own identity work. If you don't know who you are, if you don't know the joy and genius of being Latino, how are you going to teach children to find the joy and genius of their history, of their existence? If you are not woke and you don't have consciousness and criticality, how are you going to teach that to students? If you don't have joy in this profession, how in the world are you going to enable joy in your classroom? And so, with identity, particularly, identity is a beautiful thing. And it's important for like people of color, like Latinos, right? When the world has not shined the light on you in the way that you deserve, you have to unlearn and rebuild and reclaim who you are. And that's what we want for our students. We want them to know who they are not, and who they are destined to be. And it's important, especially for people of color, when the world has given them through cartoons and commercials and media ads that you're not beautiful, that you're not smart, that you cannot wear your hair like that or talk like that to get a job. You got to be somebody else. You got to be more white to be accepted. And that's why we are kind of changing that narrative. Show up how you are, and how you are is enough.
Thank you so much. I did misspeak earlier, so I apologize to the audience. The keynote was not recorded, but like she said, it's in the book, and it is in the book. As a person who read it, she wasn't lying to you. And then also, she did say we're going to be sharing a lot of this material, and I'll be happy to share my notes with anyone who would ask for them as well. We do have another question for you. We have about, I think, about 10 minutes left for questions, 10, 12 minutes. Um, I would just like your opinion, and this is one of the questions that I kind of was curious to hear your response to. What actions do you want folks in schools to be taking to strengthen this work and to create culturally, historically responsive literacy opportunities for students? Like, you shared some of the lessons, and obviously there's the framework, but like, what do you really, what would, you said you're rewriting the standards, right? What are some other actions that you would just love to see people who are real about the work actually do, like in terms of action steps?
So I have it all written out. I write out this plan for the US system. Like, I revise it every day. Number one, let's say if we're talking about a school district, the superintendent must be an anti-racist educator. I notice I have districts that adopt my model, and I notice what works. I notice that the superintendent shows up to each and every one of my sessions. We're having a curriculum writing session. That superintendent is there writing curriculum with their teachers. We're having we're rewriting our interview questions to be more anti-racist and equitable and culturally responsive. The superintendent is there. It's more than just rhetoric, but the superintendent is adopting the model and saying, this is what you must do to write lesson plans. This is what we're observing for. They will find ways to navigate their teacher evaluation and things like that. So leadership, and we could say the same for principals. Leadership really matters. Those districts where it's going to fall short, they don't show up. I mean, I have a grant right now, and sadly, with my district for 3 years, we do about 20 or so sessions a year. We're on year 3, Brother Paul, and not one session a principal showed up. See, you gotta want this. You gotta want that taste of freedom that Sister Harriet mentioned. And then you start to say, you gotta know what you have. So many principals have not taught in years. I ask principals the first time I meet them, I said, when's the last time you taught a lesson? 1 year, 3 years, 15 years. I said, you cannot be a teacher leader and not write curriculum and teach. You cannot teach twice a year in the whole year, 40 minutes. Come on. That's the only way I stay connected to education is because I teach children. As busy as I am, I will find a way to teach a classroom and to ask a teacher to come and volunteer. And so that is there. You have to hold teachers accountable for teaching this, and you have to go and observe for it. That's when it happens. And you got to know how to do it yourself. So when those things are in place, it becomes sort of intricate to the culture of the school or the district. It's not a Band-Aid. So many people have Band-Aid CRE programs. Oh, I'm doing this after school program, and that's when we're getting identity and justice in. No, I'm getting it in other spaces, Saturday programs. No, it should be every day in that classroom.
Okay. That was what we call a word, right? Let the church say amen and all of that.
And, or the mashed bread, I mean.
Absolutely. I don't even know where to go after that. So, but okay, thankfully I got a question, right? They bailed me out with another question because Lord. All right. So, all right, here's a question. Identity is critical.
Yeah.
It's also important to understand intersections. So,
Yeah.
and understand how one can be both Black and Latinx. And so the question is for you, Dr. Muhammad, how will you expound upon that?
Yeah, so that's the beauty of identity. It's not static, it is dynamic. And that's the beauty of criticality. You might be oppressed in multiple ways. You might be Black, Latinx, queer, right? That's why it's so important to understand oppression, because some people are not just oppressed by one identity historically, but it can be more than one. And so, we have to appreciate people who are biracial, bicultural. In the United States, sometimes if you half Black, you're Black. And folks don't even acknowledge or teach or educate you on who you are fully. Right? And so I just want to say to that question, it is important to understand intersections of not just identities and who you are as being Black and Latinx, but any kind of misrepresentation, exploitation, oppression you have experienced uniquely for being Black and Latinx. Any kind of linguistic injustice that happens too, based on how we speak, right? And so you have to understand the identity and the oppression and then work toward ways to dismantle those things. And that's what I want teachers to be able to do in classrooms. And they can, but you may not, if you haven't read anything since your teacher ed program, you're going to struggle. If you don't cultivate your genius on a regular, you're going to struggle. It's going to feel impossible and it's going to feel uncomfortable, but you can do it.
Thank you. Thank you. We have another question from our team, and I actually wanted to give you. I'm glad that this was one of the questions. I want to give you time to add more to the addition of the joy pursuit after the book was so well received as it was written. So I kind of know, like, having, that it's not necessarily an add-on, but some people might see that. So I want to give you an opportunity to speak to that. Why was it so important to emphasize that now after the fact, so to speak?
Well, I do emphasize joy. I did not make it as a pursuit on its own in the book, but I talk about joy in the book. I just assumed that folks would be joyful when they're teaching with this model, and I would see examples. Once I learn something, once I know more than I knew yesterday, I'm going to do something. I don't care if I wrote it in the book or not. I'm going to change it. And I'm going to speak on it. And next week, if I find that Black people said we need a sixth pursuit, I might talk about that too. So I talk more in the book about joy and love being sort of like the foundation to identity, skills, criticality, and intellectualism. But once the pandemic hit, it was another uprising. Y'all remember, it wasn't just folks dying and getting sick by the virus and
Mm.
isolating, but folks were still being killed who were Black, and it became an uprising. And then teachers had to go to virtual learning and they struggled. I struggled. And it was almost like every time I would talk, I say, we need joy. I would find ways to try to create joy for teachers because, see, nobody has the job of a teacher. It is difficult, it is heavy. You are working with children who have experienced trauma. You are trying to navigate so many identities, so many oppressions, and still teach your content. And it came to me like, wow, but they would always get joy historically in Black communities. How can we do that in classrooms today? So that's where I became more intentional about joy in my life. Because when, Paul, you know this, when you're doing social justice work, you have to be intentional about your joy because the dogs will start barking, as you said. People will not be for this. And sometimes it's parents and sometimes it's people you work with. And so we have to be intentional about our own joy and self-care and happiness and elevating beauty. And I found that joy gives a great balance to criticality and anti-oppression.
Mm.
So yeah, that's why.
Thank you, thank you. And so we have like a connected question, right, that came through as you were speaking. So, how do we engage teachers who do want to do this work or those who push against it? I'll be honest, I want to know, what do you do about those who push against it? Because they
So
out there.
you got two push againsters. You got people who will push against it because they don't know, they're fearful, yet they are open to learn and listen. Those are the people we're going to work with. Then you got people who push against it because they're racist and maybe sexist and or ignorant and they don't want change. They're colonized in the brain. Those are people that's going to be harder. I try with those people and I try to be patient and I love on them. But as my best friend, Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz she reminds me two things. She says, Gholdy, your PD sessions will not regulate their hearts. And she says, Gholdy, number two, she says, your responsibility is to tell the truth in kindness and love, and how they take it up. If they get angry, that's on them. So that second group is difficult. They need some therapy. Bettina Love says, get some anti-racist therapy. Get some help. I mean, I'm serious because something's not right with your heart when people are being killed and when in schools they're crying and hurting and you do not feel that does not. There's a 1258 poem, a poem that's written in 1258 that I mentioned in the book. It says, if you don't feel for other people's hurt, pain, or misery, you do not deserve to be called human. That's humanizing education. Now, for the first group, I try to get to the root. Why are you against this, dear parent? What part of liberation and humanity are you so much against? That's how I ask them. Because we're talking about children's lives and I'm talking about other people's children. You do what you want with your own child, but you do only excellent when you have other people's children in front of you. And I get to the root. Is it fear? Is it because you have never felt what it means to be a Black woman or oppressed or a person of color? Tell me. Is it ignorance? I get to the root of it and then I work within it. I am not here to sell people's liberation. I'm not here to trying to teach you that the Holocaust is bad. But why is it okay to teach about Jewish excellence and not Black excellence? Why is it okay to teach about that oppression and not the lives who were lost last year? I ask them these questions. I'm not here to convince you that liberation and justice is a good thing. You better convince me. I'm not here to teach you to convince you that truth and justice is a good. You hear how that sounds, Paul? But that's where they are in their mind. I'm not selling people's humanity. They did that historically. I don't do that today, and I won't. But I will help you and I will show you what this looks like. And some teachers I work with, we start from point A. I get lesson plans sent to me teaching mathematics through how many slaves can fit in a slave ship. I'm not kidding. I got this lesson. And he was open enough to ask me, Gholdy, is this a good lesson? A math teacher in our country. I said, no, it is not, and you must stop it. And then I work with that teacher. I said, if you're serious about this work, I'll work with you. And that's what we must do if we are teacher leaders.
Thank you once again. I mean, and we'll have to stop there, and that's a perfect place to stop with Q&A. I mean, we actually saw something local that has gone national with the, February 1st Intro to Black History Month lesson that wants to teach the Code of Hammurabi with how should this slave be punished. This happened, right in our home state. So these instances of curricular violence will happen, right? And so, but there are people who do those things who really don't intend to do them. There are many that do intend to do them, but I really do hope that as a district and as the group that's here, and there are many people on this call that really want to do exactly what you just described in terms of this liberatory education. So just on behalf of them and myself, BLMA and CARE, I just want to say thank you. And I'm going to call in, there she is, the lovely Miss Harris, to close us out.
Well, y'all just got y'all lives blessed. Okay.
My best friend.
Listen, that is my best friend, you guys. You just got your lives blessed by my very best friend, Dr. Gholdy Muhammad. So I know that we can't physically see each other, but please, you all, light it up in the chat box for Dr. Gholdy Muhammad. Show her some love for all of the knowledge that she imparted on us today. I posted a link in the chat box of a Padlet. Let us know what you thought about today, some key takeaways, things that you're still pondering. We will make sure that you guys have access to all of the materials that she shared with us tonight. And so I shared a quote last night with the students, and I was inspired again tonight. One of my favorite quotes, and which really drew me to Dr. Gholdy Muhammad's work, is by Dr. Asa Hilliard. And he says, I have never encountered any children in any group who are not geniuses. There is no mystery on how to teach them. The first thing you do is to treat them like human beings, and the second thing you do is to love them. And Dr. Muhammad just gave us the antidote. She gave us the antidote to fix the harms that have been committed against Black and Brown children in our school system. I want to say thank you to our sponsors for the Week of Action, Black and Latino Male Achievement, Leaders Igniting Transformation, MMABSE, Showing Up for Racial Justice, Black Educators Caucus, Community Schools, Milwaukee Teachers Education Association, and if I'm forget African American Roundtable and Civic Engagement. If I'm forgetting anybody, please charge it to my head and not my heart. Thank you to all of the elected officials who showed up today. I think I saw School Board Director Marva Herndon, School Board Director Megan O'Halloran, Superintendent Posley was in here this evening. And thank you so much to Milwaukee Public Schools for continuing to support now for the third year in a row Black Lives Matter Week of Action in our schools. Again, thank you, Dr. Gholdy Muhammad. Thank you, Paul Moga. Thank you, community, for attending, you all. And we will see you tomorrow at the Talent Showcase. Everybody have a good night.
So I don't know if I'm supposed to stay on here or what's happening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Muhammad. You are phenomenal.
Oh, thank you, sis.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom. We just appreciate you.
Thank you. And thank you, Paul and Angela, my bestie.
So yesterday the meeting just cut at 7 o'clock. So I was just expecting it to cut off. But thank you so much, Dr. Muhammad. Like, you don't even understand how impactful this is. Like, we are really working to do the work that you're talking about and like really put it into practice. Like, I actually planned my lessons this week with your framework, and it just is really changing my life. And I think it's going to change the lives of my scholars. So I just thoroughly appreciate this so much, and you sharing all of your knowledge with us here in Milwaukee. So we thoroughly appreciated you, and you did an awesome job. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Please. And we will be in touch.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it doesn't stop here. We'll keep supporting each other. Okay, you all have a great night.
You also. All right. Oh, good. Thank you. All right, everybody.
Have a great night.